Toyota has dropped a, I would call this a budget Purosangue, because if you look at the front-end graphics of this car, that's what it reminds me of. But at the same time, this feels like a fantastic value for what you're paying. You get a lot of cool features standard in the new Toyota Crown Signia XLE, which is the base trim. So what we're going to do in this video, we're going to have a look at this design from a front, side, rear, and the interior. I also like the interiors of Toyota these days. I do think they look great. We still have a nice housing for it. We have a lot of physical buttons in it, and that's what I've been saying. It feels like the more base or the less luxurious cars, to me, the interiors are the ones I prefer because they usually tend to have more physical buttons in it, and that goes for this as well. So before we jump into Photoshop here and have a look at this new design from Toyota, which by the way, I do think it looks a lot better than the weird Crown sedan with this plastic piece lifted sedan. I'm not sure what Toyota was thinking there. Still a pretty unique looking car, but this just, the design comes together better here in this SUV form. So Toyota's new wagon-like SUV fills the spot left by the now defunct Venza, which ended production after the 2024 model year, and this is an article from Car and Driver. I'm going to link it down below if you want to go and check it out. So the pricing for the entry XLE trim starts at $44,985, and the limited, the top spec, is about $5,000 more. And again, just $5,000 more, you get a lot more features for the limited spec. And I think the design feels like it looks to be a lot more expensive than that. And it features a hybrid powertrain here as well. So as I said, the entry level starts at just about $45,000, which is $2,450 above the Crown sedan, which I think is worth it. But it's a pretty steep rise compared to the old Venza that started at $36,465. However, the Venza, to me, when that first came out, I thought it had a weak looking design. I didn't like the design as much as I like this one, and I think just for that reason, I think the pricing that we have here for the new Crown Signia, I think it justifies it just with the features and also this new design language that we have from Toyota that feels a lot more upscale than the old Venza, in my opinion. You have some very cool standard features for the new Crown Signia. You have a wireless version of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and you also have a pair of 12.3-inch digital displays, one for the gauge cluster, of course, and one for the infotainment screen, in addition to a bunch of different buttons, which we're going to have a look at in a minute in Photoshop. The XLE's, the base trim's cabin, is adorned with a combination of fabric and vinyl seats and earns a heated leather steering wheel. For the base model, a power liftgate and a 6-speed audio system. To me, that sounds like pretty much everything I would need in this type of vehicle. However, if you want to go for the limited, it adds a panoramic glass roof, which I don't care about at all. I don't like any type of sunroofs in any sort of car. You have 21-inch wheels. So if I could get the XLE, the base with the 21-inch wheels, I think that would be my preferred spec for this new Crown Signia. Leather upholstery, of course, heated rear seats. Now with this top trim, parking sensors, and the speaker count increases with an 11-speaker JBL audio system. No matter which spec you go for, the XLE or the Limited, you're still going to get the same 2.5-liter 4-cylinder under the hood with, and that pairs 3 electric motors. You have 2 electric motors in the front end, front axle, and 1 in the rear. The power that kicks in whenever you need the traction in the rear. However, this is a bit of a letdown here. We do have a CVT gearbox. This design, I think, looks, it feels like it needs, I want to have a proper gearbox. I'm never a fan of CVT gearboxes. They just feel like I'm driving a scooter in high school because they keep revving and revving and revving, and they never switch gears because it's a continuous variable transmission. And I always want to have gears. I want to feel like the car is taking another breath as I'm accelerating. The combined output power is 240 horsepower. So it's not too powerful, but I do think 240 horsepower for this type of package, it feels like a sweet spot, and it is a Toyota. It's not supposed to have 500 horsepower anyway. The design looks great, so let's jump into Photoshop here and have a look at this beauty of a car. And the reason why I think this looks like a Purosangue, so I chose the red version here for the press photos just to hammer in that point. So looking up top, I do like what Toyota is doing with the new design language here. We have this bar, this blade up top, and you can see that we have a wing sticking in here, and this looks very much like the Purosangue. We have a nice little LED here, daytime run light up top, super thin, very chiseled design. I do like this line up top because it feels like everything happens underneath this line, and this feels like it's a clear connection to the new spindle grills that Lexus has in their NX, for example, and the RX as well, where you go from open here, then into some indents in the bodywork of the car, and then you have a main opening for the grill down here. This looks very EV-ish to me. Now, in this case, we do have proper bumper headlights. You can see that the main headlight unit is just a light bulb that sits right here inside of the bumper, but I do like the framing for it. I think it feels natural with the rest of the design. Maybe not to have it cut all the way through the body color in this piece. Maybe just cut it somewhere here and have some body color here. To not have this, because I always want to have a solid line at the bottom of the key graphics in the front end to create a solid foundation of body colored surfaces that builds up everything that goes on top of it. Other than that, the front end looks super clean. I like the lines that we have in the hood here as well. Very chiseled and very, you can clearly see that this is a Toyota now because we have the same design in the sedan and also in the new Prius. So looking at the side view here, the proportions look really nice too. We have this line at the bottom cutting right in here, and I do think this line does have a connection to what's going on in the rear end right here in the bumper, so that's nice. Again, very slim lights in the rear end as well. We have a nice roof spoiler, and look at the proportions here. The greenhouse sits very low compared to the rest of the body, creating a very sporty looking SUV for this type of design. And as he said in the article as well, this feels almost like a lifted wagon because it's so stretched out. The length of this feels more like a wagon design, and compared to the height, in relation to the height, feels more like a wagon design than it does an SUV, and I'm all for that. It would be cool to see if they actually dropped a proper wagon and removed all this black plastic that we have going on all around here, make all of this body color and make a sporty version of this design. I think that would be a really cool idea from Toyota. This looks to be the 21-inch wheels here on the limited trim. The wheels look great too, even though I'm not a huge fan of making them. This doesn't look to be 100% black. This looks more like gunmetal, which is okay, but I would still want to bring back, a lot of car companies go with darker wheel designs these days, and I'm still a fan of a lighter wheel design so I can appreciate the spoke design that we have going on here, because these are relatively good looking wheels, and I want to, again, I want to see what's going on with the spoke design inside of the wheel. Now looking at the rear end here, feels a little bit more generic in its design in the rear. Maybe some Jeep influences here with this light bar that we have. We also had the light bar in the Venza. You can see just how chiseled and slim these taillights are. Everything sits within here, the indicator light and the reverse lights and everything. We have a reflector light down here. A solid rear diffuser sticking out pretty far here. And I do like this design because when we have black going in this far into the body, it makes it feel a little bit more athletic in the rear end. We can't have that in the front though. You can see that we don't have a big black graphic sticking out like this in the front end like we have in the rear. But in the rear we want to have that because it reduces the overall weight visually, and again it just makes it feel a lot more sporty by removing some of this body color that we have. And here you can see the connection with this line in the back, cutting in through the rear axle and then coming back right here in the side view, looking beautiful. Pretty substantial top roof spoiler here. It feels big enough that we could have maybe placed this wiper and hit it under here, but this being in this price range, you gotta go up to pretty expensive cars to find that feature where the wiper is hidden up top and all comes down when you're using it. Now last but not least, this interior. What a great looking interior by Toyota. This again, if you look at this and you think about the price point, I think this feels way more upscale than what the price suggests. Even though I have to sit inside of the car and fiddle around with the buttons and everything to get get a proper feel for the quality here, but just visually it looks great. We have this nice integration of both the infotainment screen and the gauge cluster in one single feature here. And then inside of this framing, we place the gauge cluster way deeper into the dash than what we have for the infotainment screen. And this is a great example of how you can still have two completely fully digital screens on the dash, but it still looks very nicely integrated overall. It feels like the designers actually put in some effort to make this a very cool and clean automotive style for the interior. And in addition to that, I do love that we have all these buttons for the heated seats. You can see that here. The temp controls with a small little LCD display, it looks like to be right here. Very easy and super quick to adjust the temp if you want to do that instead of having to go into the infotainment screen. The steering wheel looks fantastic as well. I like this chamfer going around the centerpiece here with the Toyota logo. Looks like you have some buttons for the, probably this area is for the gauge cluster. And right here you have the controls for the cruise control settings on the right side. In the middle, this is what we're seeing from Lexus and Toyota in pretty much every single car these days, to have this type of gear selector in the middle, which is totally fine. Traction control buttons. And here you have the EV modes. I'm not sure if you can put this fully in EV like you can in some Lexuses, but you do have some settings here for the drive modes, in addition to some USB-Cs, cup holders here. The leather interior looks great. I like the brown leather in contrast with the silver trim that we have going on here. And look at this beautiful integration of the side vents. We have a very clean framing for it, dynamic looking styling, and how this vent then comes in and houses the lower section of this vent. We have a different styling for the driver's side with some additional buttons for the lighting settings right there as well. So overall, a great job by Toyota. I do like their new design language, which this is a part of, this and the sedan, and also the Prius, which I've reviewed on the Sketch Monkey channel if you want to go and check that out, which honestly was a lot more fun to drive than I was expecting. The only thing that I wish Toyota would do here is, as I said earlier, I want to see this being in a proper wagon form with maybe a little bit more horsepower, maybe 300 horsepower or something like that. That would be a fantastic little car when it looks this great. And if they could also add, this is reaching now, but if they could also make a wagon version without the black plastic, and also remove that CVT gearbox, throw in a nice little 6-speed, that to me would be a great addition to the Toyota lineup, even though that is never going to happen, unfortunately.